right, thanks for coming back for round two. If you paid attention this weekend, you heard about Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was asked to leave the Little Red Hen restaurant by the restaurant owner. The restaurant owner doesn't agree with her politics, didn't agree with her working for Trump, doesn't agree with Trump, and so she asked Sanders to leave the restaurant. There's been a fair bit of comparison of this to the Masterpiece Cake guy down in Colorado, and there's been some talk on both sides. Some people, discrimination is never okay. Some people, support it either way, and then of course you have people on both sides supporting it for whichever cause suits their narrative the best. For example, Sunny Hostin, whatever her name is. She's on in the morning, I think, with Joy Behar on some morning rag you do better not listening to. And basically she went off on some sort of tirade about, that this was okay, that there's consequences for working for Trump, there's consequences for being a Trump supporter, and these are the consequences. And, Trump's a bigot, and therefore Sanders has to be a bigot, and you're free to treat bigots however you feel fit. Missing some of the irony there, but she says that there's a difference between the cake guys and between this because the cake guys were born gay, they didn't choose to be gay. It's not a choice, whereas Sanders has a choice to work for Trump, to put into place and say the things that she does. Now, the guys on the right will say that, the cake guy, decorating a cake like that is a work of art. It's a freedom of expression. It's free speech, basically. And he's not, shouldn't be forced to use his freedom of speech to go against his religious convictions. And they'll say that Sanders was discriminated against because of her politics, and that somehow that is different than her religious religious beliefs. It doesn't work, right? If you're going to say that decorating a cake is a work of art, is freedom of expression, then grilling a mean steak is freedom of expression as well. You've seen some of those chefs put stuff out there. If you want to tell me that some of those things that they do aren't freedom of expression, then there's you got to think harder. The point is that, both of these sides, what they're missing is that it's not about freedom of expression. It's not about freedom of speech here. It's about private property, right? The cake shop and the restaurant are both private places of business. They're both owned by an owner. They're a privately owned business, and it's up to that owner to make the decision that they want to make about who is going to be allowed to be a patron. Now, right, there's before any of this happened, right, before they got kicked out, there was no voluntary exchange of fees, of goods, of services. There was nothing like that, right? Somebody walks in the door, they ask to have a cake made. Guy says, no, I'm not going to do it. Sarah Sanders walks in the door, asks for a meal, and the restaurant owner says, I don't think so. There's been no exchange of anything right now. Right? And so there's no contract, there's nothing. It's private property, they're on that person's private property, and the person that owns the private property can ask them to leave, they can serve them, they can do whatever they want. All right? As long as they're not directly violating the other individual's rights, as long as they're not aggressing on them, it's really not an issue. I think both sides are missing that, and I think that's kind of where that ends, right? It's a private property issue. It's a freedom of association issue, and that's what we need to recognize it as. To be wishy-washy either way is just it's inconsistent, and it helps nobody's argument. It helps nobody accomplish anything. Now, that was the first part. The second part kind of stems from that. Now, continuing on with Sanders, she left the restaurant. This comes from Mike Huckabee, her father. She left the restaurant. She went across the road to another restaurant. She was followed across the road, and the crowd continued to heckle her from the sidewalk. I don't know, screaming through windows, blah, blah, blah. Basically, they followed her over, and they left her alone in the restaurant, but they still were out there screaming, yelling, carrying on. We've seen this multiple times in the last couple weeks. Trump people getting heckled out of restaurants. And there's some issue there that needs to be approached. Now, it's private property. If the private property owner decides to kick out the people that are heckling other patrons, they're free to do that. Although it does get a little tricky when you're trying to ask 15 people who are already sort of unruly to leave, than asking one or two people to leave. There's a little bit of difference there, and it can get a little dicey when you ask a whole bunch of people to leave. The chances are people aren't just gonna. If you ask 15 people to leave a restaurant, they're already up on somebody about their politics. They're not just gonna walk away quietly. But anyway, so again, that should pretty much be up to the private property owner, right? How they want to deal with it. The problem is, a lot of the time, these heckling squads don't just happen in places of private property. As in Sanders' case, they go out into the public sphere. And that's where we kind of run into problems because we're not sure how to deal with it. Are your rights being violated when someone is just kind of standing in your way and making it more difficult for you to go by? Is someone shouting at you a violation of your rights? Right? There's no harm, there's no violence, nobody's hurting you, nothing's happening. And it's this kind of wishy-washy situation where it's really hard to tell. For example, Pam Bondi, I think she's the Attorney General down in Florida. She went to go see the Mr. Rogers documentary, and on her way out got heckled by some folks that are not keen on the idea that she doesn't like Obamacare. And so they ask her all these tough questions, they said, and she wouldn't answer the questions, and because getting heckled by 15 people is the best time to answer a question, right? And as it turns out, these people are shouting at her, or asking questions, or are spitting at her. Well, now we start to. So if you're going to spit at somebody, if you're going to spit on somebody, is that a violation of rights? Has a line been crossed at that point? And if is there a difference between spitting at somebody and spitting on somebody? Probably, right? If you get spit on, your personal rights have been aggressed, I'd say. All right, but we see these situations, right, happening in the public sphere, and they're hard to decipher, to thresh out, and we need to be really careful with that. Mainly because I don't have a problem with protesting, I don't have a problem with crowds, but when you get into groups of people that are fueled by emotion, it becomes very easy to escalate the situation. If you're in a crowd of 15 people and somebody trips and falls and they bump you and they push you forward, well, now you push the person in front of you, and they probably push the person in front of them. you don't know that that started with somebody tripping and falling. If you're already heightened and angry at someone, yelling at someone, spitting at someone, if you're that angry and someone pushes you, there's a good chance you're going to push somebody else, right? There's a good chance that violence is that much closer when you have a handful of angry people, of emotional people. And crowds grant a fair bit of anonymity. And I can't say it. I said it earlier. When you're in a crowd of 15 people, if I throw a rock, it's a lot easier to hide, right? If I throw a rock and I'm in a crowd of 2 people, well, it's me or it's the other person. It's not that hard. When there's 15 people, and there's 20 people, and there's 10 people, you throw a rock, right? And nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to see. Maybe somebody sees, right? Maybe not. It's going to be hard to tell. And so you gotta worry about that, right? And we've seen some of these crowds in public spheres get violent and hurt people, even if the people are on their side, right? I think about I don't know if it was Brett Weinstein or Charles Murray. On these college campuses get accosted by students, and some professor gets her arm jacked up and her shoulder messed up. Once you foment these people into crowds and groups of people who think that it's okay to harass people, who are encouraged to harass people. Violence is not that far away. Now, I'm not saying that we need to stop crowds of people from protesting and from doing that sort of thing. That's their right. But I'm saying we need to be careful because it's that much closer to violence. And so when you have people like Miss Maxine Waters from California, that woman is out of her gourd. She has been elected to office in California since 1991. I don't know what that says about the people that have elected her. I don't know what that says about anything. I mean, she's on par with she's beyond Trump crazy. Trump's crazy has gotten him a little bit. Waters crazy is just like off the chain, man. This past weekend, she was encouraging people to surround and heckle and harass Trump supporters, to harass Trump cabinet members, to harass Trump administrative people, in the hope that they would get the message that people aren't going to put up with them, and therefore then they would leave their station with Trump. So because of being harassed by a group of people, they're going to leave their job. Number one, that's not going to happen. Number two, that just it's beyond. That is some of the most fascist stuff you've heard in recent times. I mean, let's bully people and push people until they agree with us. Let's not sit down and have a discussion and talk about things. Let's use emotion and yelling and screaming to get a message across. It like boggles my mind. And it's not just her, right? I mean, like that's the same sort of tactics that the Westboro Baptist Church uses, right? Go to somebody's funeral and start screaming and carry on about gay marriage, right? That solves a lot, helps a lot, makes everybody love you. It's a great way to go about doing your business, right? I don't know. But anyway, so I think, again, what it boils down to, though, right, because we have this situation where we have crowds of people harassing and heckling others. More often, it's at a university. It's on a sidewalk. It's on a road. What are those places? Those are public places. Those are places where, there's no real structure as to how laws about that stuff need to be enforced. If that was your backyard, and somebody came over there and started heckling you because you're serving beef and they're a vegetarian, you can ask them to leave. You can escort them off your property because it's your property, right? If I go into a restaurant and I'm demanding, steak and it's a vegetarian restaurant and they want to ask me to leave, they can do that, right? If there's a Klansman and he goes into a seamstress, black seamstress, and demands her to make a robe for him, she has every right to say no. Every right to say no. Because it's her property. Not because the Klansman's a bigot, not because the Klansman is an ignorant fool, but because it's her property, it's her job, nobody has the right to force anybody to do anything. And that's why we need to get the public property out of things. It needs to become private property so that we can structure it, so we can have a set of rules, so we have things to follow. And it's not just at the whim of whatever the judge's fancy is that day. Because there's no repercussion. If a judge decides something, if a law decides something, cop decides something one day is okay and not the next day, and maybe he lets this pass today and that pass tomorrow. We have no repercussions for that. You can't do anything. If it's a private property owner, you can, right? If the restaurant says I'm not allowed there because they don't like my T-shirt, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to tell my friends not to go there. They're going to tell their friends, hey, they kicked him out because he had on a T-shirt that had a picture of Jesus on it, and they didn't like that. So guess what? Now everybody knows. I mean, it's the free market, it's the word of mouth, and with social media and everything else the way it is today, it's the best thing going. Get that private property involved. So anyway, thank you for sticking with me with this long if you did. Get out there, plant some seeds of freedom, and grow some liberty. You can find me at libertymindedagrarian.com or at bpangy on Steemit or Twitter, or find me on Facebook if you want. It shouldn't be that hard. Thank you. Take care.